We may not know him face to face, but he's also familiar. One of the most beloved judges of Masterchef Australia, Chef Gary Mehigan. He's a renowned celebrity chef, and he was in Sri Lanka whipping up some amazing delectables at Cinnamon Grand Colombo. Having trained at the Connaught and Le Souffle in London before moving to Australia, Chef Gary has headed kitchens in some of Melbourne's most prominent restaurants in his career. His signature style, as we all know, is positive encouragement, which is something we'd all like to hear and see in our kitchens. So let's find out a little bit more about Chef Gary, who I met at the London Grill at Cinnamon Grand, and he's on Let's Talk today. Gary, welcome to Sri Lanka. So was there anything you really wanted to do kitchen-wise, specifically in Sri Lanka, when it comes to the array of fresh produce
Seafood.
and stuff we have?
Seafood. I mean, it's hard to beat it. I mean, I was talking to Gayan, who's a Sri Lankan friend of mine, and he said, you've got to use, lagoon crab, the prawns, the snapper, the tuna. He said it's limitless, and dried fish too. I think I'm going to be eating that rather than, putting it on my menu. But I've got a fair sense of Sri Lankan cuisine, but not in its place. So, my thinking is this: it's a bit like, I don't know, you want to eat a great pizza. You haven't really eaten a great pizza until you've sat on a little, cobbled street in Naples and eaten it in its place. So this is what I'm looking forward to here. So obviously I've had hoppers and, pan rolls and, great curries and great seafood dishes. But I want a bit of street food. I want a bit of home cooked food. I'm already scrabbling around in the kitchen going, what's that? What's that? So yeah.
Anything that piqued your interest when it comes to Sri Lankan cuisine?
Sri Lankan cuisine is the spicing is quite complex. So it's, for me as a French chef, because essentially I'm French trained, it's a bit like my love of Indian food. It's something that sometimes you feel like you have to be born with, like that innate sense of subtlety or, rip-roaring, punch in the mouth. So I think, if there's secrets to be learned, that's it for me. That's what I'm looking for. In terms of flavour combinations, it's, even watching one of the young chefs today, he was just making a black chicken and just watching how he's cooking the spice, even the smell of the spice and the fact they're all toasted. I think there's some ground roasted rice in there as well. So there's a lot of complexity. And for a chef like me that might use one or two spices or even just use like an aromatic like thyme or rosemary, it's fascinating. And I do make one of those kind of spice mixes at home. One of the first recipes I was ever taught was a black pork by a good friend of mine. And that would have been 30 years ago. And that was the spice mix he gave me. I still make the same mixture.
So being on Masterchef, I'm sure you've had your fair share of Sri Lankan dishes.
Sure.
What's your verdict?
What's my verdict? My goodness. Maybe I can answer it more broadly, but I think what it is I'm attracted to dishes and cuisines that kind of are the antithesis of maybe the simplest of French dishes or Italian dishes, if that makes any sense. Like, we'll take a cauliflower, we'll shred it, we'll cook it in milk, maybe with a little bit of garlic, but nothing else, drain it, puree it, and it's like a pure kind of flavour of cauliflower, nothing else. Give that to a Sri Lankan and they'll go, where's all the flavour? Like, what else is going in it? You might pop a piece of fish on that and drizzle it with olive oil. And so it's, in a sense, it's a pure expression of the ingredient, but it doesn't have that complexity. And there are dishes that are complex, but I think the appeal of, say, dishes that are the antithesis of that piece of fish with olive oil are dishes like that black pork or the lamprey or things like this where there's just so much going on. Like what's the spice in that? How have they made that? Why does that taste like that? That's what I love.
Two things, the coconut and the chili.
Yeah.
Very prominent in Sri Lankan cuisine. What's your take on this? How would you use it if you were given these two ingredients?
I mean, I cook a lot of Indian dishes, and I've been, I've travelled quite widely in India and down into Kochi, Kerala, and also Tamil Nadu. So there's a trail of familiarity that, extends into Sri Lanka. So I understand coconut, I understand, curry leaves, jaggery, all of these kind of, even things like hoppers, which are, appams or, palapam or idli appam, there's that familiarity, roti breads. I love all of that. Understanding them, God, I'm a chili freak. I mean, I love chili. I love everything from a hot kind of complex, jammy, sweet, funky sambal, you know, like with dried fish, stuff that really like smack in the mouth stuff, you know, to more subtle kind of creamy, you know, sauces that it might have a very simple spice flavour. I mean, there's a Kerala dish called a fish moile, which is really simple. I love that. So I'm kind of in search of that. So that's my understanding of it. Plus, you know, I've travelled a lot in Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, particularly. So, of course, the coconut and chili are quite prominent.
After doing all that, I'm surprised you just did not come here before.
What? Yeah, exactly. Why not? Missed the boat.
You were speaking about Masterchef. Most of them are home cooks or they're professionals who would love to cook. What are some of the experiences that you would like to share, the insights that you gained from them?
Well, I think what it taught me very early, like season 1 was a surprise for all of us because the contestants didn't know what to expect, and nor did we, nor did the producers, in fact. And what it turned into was a very supportive, positive television program around one of the great pleasures in life. You know, I always describe it as art and music as one of the things that draws us together and reminds us of how much we've got in common, rather than now, you know, in these times, particularly now, where it's so divisive, so many terrible things going on in the world, we've forgotten about what, you know, brings us together. So that was number one. And I always, in that first season, probably for the first few months of filming, I was a little resistant to accepting that home cooks could teach me anything. Like, after all, I'd been a chef for 25 years, what are you going to teach me? But they've taught me more, I think, in a sense, than I've learned from many of even my peers. Because there's you can be you know, if you love something, like if you love baking bread at home, you might be a better baker than any bakery on the planet, just because of how passionate you are and how interested you are in that one thing. So, you know, when you see a contestant make something that you've never made before, that's a thrill. Once you accept that, once you let that in, then the learning begins, and it's a two-way street. The exchange of ideas, and because of our diversity in Australia, you know, you can have, you know, somebody from India or Singapore or, you know, Malaysia or, you know, Japan. It doesn't matter. Like, we've got a very diverse, you know, culture in Australia, and our cuisine is built on migration. You know, of those migrants that came. So that whether it's Greek, Italian, or Sudanese, you know, we've got a nice, you know, snapshot of our society on that program, and so you get lots of different interesting dishes, things that, yeah, we couldn't hope to learn if we, I don't know, just worked in a professional kitchen.
So Sri Lankan cuisine, very unique. It's not Indian, it's not Vietnamese,
Sure.
it's not Malaysian. It has its own character. But we've never kind of made a space in the world with our cuisine. How do you suggest we market it?
It's not about marketing. It's about coming of age, and it's happened to every country. You know, people seem to assume that, you know, French food's always been brilliant or Italian food's been brilliant. It's not the case. You know, and don't forget, you know, in those countries, you know, great fine dining restaurants would have been exclusively for the rich. You know, certainly in the UK, you know, we're guilty of being an impoverished culinary country. I mean, you know, my dad would say, yeah, but we had the Industrial Revolution, it got in the way. But, you know, it wasn't until the 90s, maybe even the mid-90s, that, you know, food in Britain started to, you know, take a turn and rediscover its culinary heritage and start, you know, chefs like Marco Pierre White or Gordon Ramsay started popping their heads up. And they'd gone and trained, they'd gone off and they'd left England, not Marco, but, you know, many young chefs had left the UK and trained elsewhere in the world, and then brought all of that experience back and then refined it or found their own passion and started these great restaurants. And it's happened everywhere. It's happened in the States, you know, it's happened in Australia, and all at different times, you know, and it'll happen here. Like, you know, one of my friends in Australia, Gan Pierres, he's just won a hat in the Age Good Food Guide for the two restaurants that he oversees, which is Volpero and Manny Little, and that's down on the peninsula where I live. And he's doing great modern interpretations of, you know, traditional Sri Lankan dishes, and some just traditional. You can go and have pan rolls at the bar and drink a glass of wine. And that's to an audience that has no clue about Sri Lankan food. But he was here probably 8 weeks ago or so, you know, back seeing family, looking for a bit of inspiration, taking all that back to Australia. And then don't forget, it's those young chefs that then come back. You know, so you're exporting youth and enthusiasm, and at some point it'll all pile back in, and you bring all that experience back in with new ideas and a new vision. So it's timing. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, who knows? Maybe next year.
On the Masterchef set, the three of you, Chef George and Matt Preston and you, had great chemistry on camera. Have you ever sort of thought of putting it back together again at any stage?
You know, we're good friends. We're great friends, always have been. Even when we kind of collectively decided that it was probably our time to move on. And that was a difficult negotiation with the network. I mean, we still look back and go, it was the best time of our lives. It is the best, you know, competition show on the planet. It beats everything else hands down because it's the genuine, nurturing, it's trustworthy, all of those lovely things. And we're very proud of the fact that we were the OG, you know, we were the original judges, right? But you've got to move on. We did it for 11 years. And I remember asking one of the executives, you know, how long do you think the show's got in it? And he goes, oh, another 10 years. And I was like, but not with us. We'll be old men. You know, we need to pass this baton on. And I think everybody was really surprised that we didn't want to do it until we died, you know. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
And some people do that, but it wasn't for us. And I think that I'm loving now the new judges on MasterChef. Poe is back on she's back on the show, but as a judge. I mean, come full circle. I mean, she was a contestant in 2009, so that's, you know, 14 years ago, and she's now become a colleague. I ring her for recipes, same as I might ring Rose Adam for a recipe, or Matt Sinclair, you know, all doing brilliantly in their own right, and colleagues rather than contestants. So, you know, the show goes on, and it inspires another generation, and I think it was time for us to do that. And Matt, George and I are great friends. I mean, we've just done a 3-city tour in India. We did 6 dinners, 3 masterclasses, and it was just like old times. But instead of, you know, being in front of cameras, we're just in front of people. It was fantastic. But it'd be just as normal to see us around at each other's houses, or, you know, going for a cheeky Chardonnay at a wine bar and just having a chat. And that's okay. We don't need to have an audience.
What's next for you from this point?
Christmas. Sitting on the beach, not doing anything. Yeah, back to Oz for a couple of months of R&R. I've done a lot this year. Filmed a series in India called Mega Festivals. So I've travelled all over India. I've got an outlet opening up in Melbourne Airport in December, which is kind of a fun Asian concept, which is great. I'm involved in an online delivery platform in Sydney. And I've got more travel next year. Oh, and also, yeah, there's a culinary platform in India that I'm working for called Kanosh. So that's been great. So it's an extension of kind of my love of teaching people, sharing recipes and information, and some of my passion. I think that's about it. But already my wife's going, next year's looking really busy. Can you not keep saying yes to stuff? Because I feel very lucky. When people ask me to do things, I go, ooh, that sounds interesting. And I go, yes. And then I find myself, you know, going, I need more time off. Only got one life, right?
Right. Live it to the fullest.
Yeah, live it to the fullest. Think about the other stuff later.
So thank you for coming over to Sri Lanka.
Pleasure.
And I do hope the rest of your stay is really good.
Oh, it's going to be brilliant.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.